IS represent equilibrium in the goods market, and LM represent the equilibrium in financial markets. Equilibrium in the money market is the interaction between demand for money and money supply. So we took money supply as exogenous or as giving. So that's why you see the money supply curve here as vertical line and a downward sloping curve for the demand for money. There are two factors, nominal income and interest rate. These affect demand for money. Remember when we said the demand for money, there are three reasons why we demand money. So transaction demand, which depends on the level of nominal income. Higher income level should be associated with higher demand for transaction. And precautionary demand and speculative demand, and both are related to or determined by the interest rate, and this is a negative relationship. So if for a higher interest rate, that means lower demand for money for these reasons, speculative and precautionary demand. Equilibrium here obviously is the interaction between both, and I ask you to think about money as any good where you have the equilibrium determined by the interaction between demand and supply. And what we have, this is exactly what we have here. We took money supply as exogenous, determined by a central bank. That's why you have a vertical line. We know what determines the demand for money, the intersection point, which is A here, where money supply equals money demand. And that determines the equilibrium interest rate and the money stock as well. We also explained how changes in nominal income can affect this situation, equilibrium in the money market. So, for example, if nominal income has increased, that means the demand for money curve will shift to the right. That's what you see here. So what we have here, we have a change in income, which caused a shift in the demand. So nominal income has increased from Y to Y prime. So the demand for money curve has shifted to the right. So we still have the same level of M, which again determined by monetary authorities or the central bank, but now the interest rate has increased from I to I prime. So keep that in mind, because that's what we need to derive the LM curve. How changes in income would affect equilibrium in the money market. So when income increases, that shifts the demand for money to the right, and obviously that means if income decreases, that will shift the money demand curve to the left. Okay, so we're just going to make a very simple modification to this. The equilibrium condition in the money market take place here, or the equilibrium happen when money, which is a fixed amount here, it's exogenous, this is money supply, is just given M at M level, equal, so the left-hand side here is the money supply, and the right-hand side is demand for money. So what are the determinants of demand for money? We said nominal income, which is the dollar sign Y here, just to stress that this is nominal income, and the interest rate, which is I here. Divide both sides by the price level, which will give me M over P. This is going to be, this is the real money supply, equals, now rather than having the nominal income here, I'm actually having only Y, because the nominal income divided by the price, that give you the real income. So what we have here, we have real money demand, or real demand for money on the right-hand side. So that will make it easy, or more convenient now when we drive the LM curve. Initial equilibrium in the money market, let's say, so we have here money, and we have on the vertical axis, we have the interest rate. The equilibrium in this market, interaction between money supply, which we treat it as constant, so let's say this is the level of money stock at this point, this is what is given to us by the central bank, and demand for money curve, so let's say this is MD, let's call it 1, and here is the interest rate level. So what I want to do now, I want to have the same, but on the I and Y space, so meaning I want I on the vertical axis and Y on the horizontal axis. So what I'm going to do, start like another graph where what I have here in this axis here is the Y and the interest rate. So let's say this is the associated level. So this is At this point, this is I. And at this point, we had income level, let's say, call it Y1, and I'm going to call this I1. So this is the point that is associated on the I and Y space. So this is a given level of real income, and this is how the equilibrium happened in the money market. So now let's assume a scenario where the income, or Y, has increased. Remember, what determines the demand for money? We say the transaction and precautionary and speculative demand, which depend on interest rate. If income has changed, remember from the previous slide, we have Y has increased from Y1 to Y2, and Y2 is greater than Y1. So now a higher level of income. So we'll see what's happened here. We said this will shift the demand for money. Let's say this is going to be the second one, so MD2, and the associated. So we know now that Y2 is higher. So Y2 is going to be somewhere here, and the equilibrium interest rate is going to be here. So this is called I2. So that means this is going to be at a higher point here. So this is the equivalent point on this space on I and Y. If you connect these 2 points, this will give us the LAM curve, which is, again, every point on this curve show you equilibrium in the money market. So I started with initial point where there's equilibrium in the money market, and that give me, at a given level of income, real income, there's an interest rate, so equilibrium give me the interest rate and the M, or the level of money, stock at that point, which is the green line. That's the equilibrium, the first equilibrium point, which was associated to this I1 level of interest rate, and this is the point on this space I and Y, so this is the given level of real income at this point. So then I assume the scenario in which Y has increased, so real income has increased, and of course you would imagine that when income increases, that means there's more demand for money, for transaction, and that means the demand for money, the curve for the money demand will shift to the right. So that's exactly what's happened here, this shift from MD1 to MD2. Remember, this is associated with a higher real income, which means Y2 is more or greater than Y1. So that's why I put it on the right side of Y1. What has happened here is that the interest rate has gone up to I2, which I just tried to identify here. So this is the same level I2. So now I got 2 points. If I connect these points together, that should give me the LM curve. You can see the LM curve is upward sloping curve. That was the traditional way of thinking about LM. So just keep it in mind now. So we have upward sloping curve till now, and I'll tell you why we might look at this in a different way now. But what we have here, so the same way when I talked about the IS model, you need to think about why this curve would shift to the right, or why would it shift to the left. So with the IS curve, we talked about fiscal policy components or policy variables like G or T, the government spending or taxes, and we show that how this changes in fiscal policy would affect aggregate demand, and as a result will affect the IS. If there's an increase in government spending, that will shift the aggregate demand upward, and then that means the IS curve will shift to the right. A similar way, we need to think about the LM curve. Here we talk about the money market. So basically, we're looking at what would shift demand for money to the right or to the left, and the same thing about when we talk about monetary policy, because the policy variable here is actually either T or the interest rate, depending on how or which variable the central bank targets. The traditional way of thinking about monetary policy is that the central bank choose or change the money supply, so either by increasing money supply or decreasing money supply, which as a result affect the interest rate. So in such case, then, if there is a monetary expansion, for example, so the central bank want to extend or increase money supply, we explain how central banks do that through open market operations. So if you want to expand or increase money supply, then they go to they enter the bonds market as buyers. So basically they buy bonds and they pay money. So that means they increase, actually they pay with money. So that's increasing the money supply. And that will shift the LM curve to the right. Okay. So thinking again about a contractionary monetary policy, which is the opposite effect, then that would shift the LM curve to the left. So we need to understand what shifts the IS and what shifts the LM. And just to make it easy, it's very straightforward because we know that changes in fiscal policy, which happen through G and T, or government spending and taxes, this mainly will affect the goods market because G is part of the aggregate demand. Changes in money supply, okay, that basically will happen through the money market. So the effect should go through the LM curve, okay? That's equilibrium in the money market, okay? So don't confuse yourself. It's just very, very clear and very simple, okay? So changes in fiscal policy take effect through its effect on the goods market, because goods market, remember, we talk about the short run. We're still talking about the short run. And that's why when I said in the beginning, keep in mind this is a short run or demand side analysis, because basically the equilibrium output in the short run is determined by changes in the aggregate demand. The effect of changes in fiscal policy probably will go through the aggregate demand and will affect the IS. Changes in monetary policy will go through the money market and then will affect LM. The slope of the LM, it depends on income elasticity or interest, and the interest elasticity of money demand. So how much money demand will change after a change in income or interest rates. So the larger income elasticity is if it is very sensitive to changes in income. If money demand is very sensitive to changes in income, that means the LM will be steeper. Central bank or modern central banks usually choose the interest rate. So the policy variable is the interest rate, not money supply. So this analysis, before when we drive the LM, we just thought of the LM, okay, we have equilibrium, we have the money supply is giving, and then changes in money supply will move that vertical line to the right or to the left. But as we explained at the end of the last lecture, we said usually what central banks today do, they choose the interest rate level first, and then they adjust the money supply to achieve that interest rate. What does that mean to the LM curve? So that means the LM curve is horizontal, as you see it on the graph now. So central banks choose the interest rate, which means here we have the same level of interest rate, whatever the output is, so whatever Y is. So if the central bank choose a higher level of interest rate, that means it would be above the current one, or they choose the current LM curve. If they choose lower interest rate, that means it would be below that.